Walker, and I'll be presenting a presentation on dementia and sugar. What is the connection? Please keep in mind that today's presentation is designed for educational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for advice from your own healthcare professional. We will cover the question of where does blood sugar come from and how it's used in our bodies, and then we'll look at 3 ways high sugar consumption affects the brain and increases your risk for dementia. Blood sugar, or glucose, is your body's main source of energy. It is created when carbohydrate sources from food that we eat are broken down during digestion and enter into the bloodstream. Let's review carbohydrate sources of food. It makes more sense to define complex and simple carbs this way. Complex carbohydrates are those found in whole, unprocessed foods, including fruits, vegetables, legumes, and whole grains. Simple carbs are the sugars and starches that have been refined and stripped of their natural fiber and nutrients, shown in the processed versions of food below. How does sugar enter into our system? During digestion, sugar is released into the bloodstream, which acts as a giant transport system. The pancreas senses this rise in blood sugar and releases insulin into the bloodstream. Insulin acts as a key that then travels to the different cells in our body and opens the cell doorways or membranes, allowing sugar to enter and be used for energy. This leads to the first way that sugar negatively impacts our brain cells. The term insulin resistance occurs when high or frequent consumption of sugar puts extra stress on your pancreas to produce a lot of insulin. This, over time, can lead the cells to develop a protective mechanism and become insulin resistant, meaning that the cells are no longer responsive to the insulin key. Then if sugar is unable to enter cells, they can't make the energy they need to function properly. This is a big problem in the brain because the brain uses 1/2 of all the sugar energy in our body to cover its needs for thinking, memory, and learning. If brain cells have become insulin resistant, they are unable to access the glucose and not able to function well without an energy source, causing problems with short-term memory, attention, and processing. The second way that high blood sugar can lead to damage to the brain is through the damage it causes to the blood vessels in the brain. Excess blood sugar and prolonged exposure to insulin can cause blood vessels to become less elastic and then narrow. High amounts of glucose can also cause small vascular tears inside the blood vessel walls. These small tears then act as the beginning of a dam inside the vessel, grabbing onto cholesterol molecules as they travel by, causing a buildup of plaque, which also causes the blood vessels to narrowing. It is these narrowing passageways which reduce the blood flow and oxygen to cells and can increase blood pressure. Increased blood pressure can further reduce the elasticity of blood vessels. It is currently hypothesized that it's this increased rigidity of the blood vessels which leads to a greater accumulation of the sticky protein plaques associated with Alzheimer's disease. A third way that high sugar negatively impacts brain tissue is through the nerve cells. Nerve cells shrink and die when the small blood vessels that supply them become damaged. Nerves then lose their ability to send signals affecting thinking, memory, and learning. Production of a brain chemical called BDNF, which is essential for new memory and formation and learning, also decreases. A person with diabetes is twice as likely to develop Alzheimer's disease. People consuming high levels of carbohydrates are 80% more likely to be diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. Damage to blood vessels in the brain can lead to multiple mini strokes in the brain, resulting in vascular dementia. High blood sugar also affects mental health. It interferes with how the brain processes emotions, leading to higher levels of anxiety. High blood sugar can also trigger imbalances in certain brain chemicals, leading to depression and may even increase the long-term risk of developing mental health disorders in some people. The takeaway from this slide is that if you look closely, the consumption of sugar has the same effect of cocaine on the brain cells. It lights up the same areas in the brain, meaning it stimulates the same areas in the brain that cocaine does. The other problem is that the more sugar you consume, the more your brain needs to achieve the same levels of satisfaction, which drives the addiction. So what's the takeaway? Like most things, sugar can be okay in moderation. However, we should be observant and mindful of what we're putting into our bodies. Here are some helpful tips to manage your sugar intake. Opt for whole natural foods. Processed foods are often very high in sugar, salt, and fat. If you're craving something sweet, consider a handful of berries instead. Of course, berries will have natural sugars, but what you want to watch out is for the added sugars. Read nutrition labels. There are many different names for sugar that you'll come across when reading a nutrition label. Some of the common ones include fructose, dextrose, sucrose, corn syrup, and honey. Swap out the sugary drinks. Sodas, juices, and other sweet drinks contain an alarmingly high amount of sugar. A single 12-ounce can of Coke contains 39 grams of sugar, more than the daily recommended amount of sugar for both men and women. And lastly, cut back the serving size or make substitutions. For example, if you're making baked goods, try cutting back on the amount of sugar you'd add by a third or half. You can also swap out granulated sugar with foods like unsweetened applesauce or sugar substitutes. I hope you have found this presentation useful and might think twice when you grab for that extra serving of dessert.